get the word out there. We had, we're not live yet, right?
Yeah, we are, but keep going.
Okay. No, unfortunately, my personal Twitter account, I've been locked out of it for about 6 weeks, and I had a pretty good collection of people following me, and so, that has hurt our distribution a little bit. So anyway, but yeah.
What'd you do to get to?
It wasn't anything that I wasn't suspended. It's the 2FA. So I was trying to be super secure. And for some reason, the 2FA app isn't connecting, and it works on every other service I have. And I've sent a lot of requests to Twitter support or X support, which apparently doesn't really exist. So yeah, I haven't gotten a response from them. Maybe one day.
I chalk that up to sometimes your operational security keeps you out, not the thief. Like you hear all these nightmare stories about people not storing their seed phrase correctly, but then you hear a lot of other people that just can't get into their own, can't get past their own security.
Yeah, well, I told Israel it may have been fortuitous, because then now I just am active on the Build with Bitcoin Twitter account or X account. So all the postings are there. Every once in a while, I want to do something really personal, and I have to stop myself and think about, or if I do, I just put Lynne right here, so that they know it's not necessarily the collective of Israel and I, but it's my opinion. And so it's been good to put a little bit more attention on that, and just and see how that goes. So, and Nosters also, we're jumping into Nosters, so that it really taught me. Yeah, it's like that. It's a great lesson that really underscores how important having control of all your content and information is.
Yeah, we laugh at our altcoining days, which I had 2 years of that before I figured out what Bitcoin was. But I think, are we any different when we are on centralized social media platforms? Do we all have to get rug pulled before we learn our lesson and go to Nostr? It's like our head knows better, but that's so much work. And I'm guilty of that myself. I really do need to put more of this content on Nostr, because I've got a whole group of people in Tokyo that are always pushing me, and they're like, Craig, decentralization is important. Like, don't sleep on this. And so I think we should all kind of do our part to build on Nostr, and I need to do that as well. So I'm hoping this next push with the Bitcoin Daily, we'll be putting a lot more content on Nostr, because otherwise we're hoping that Lord Elon is a benevolent dictator and takes our side on these issues, but he could always die.
Well, the other thing too is, in the last week, something that I've noticed, I feel that X has really become a great platform for free and open speech, and I really applaud that whole movement. But in the week since he's really endorsed Trump, I'm only making the observation of how it seems to really be skewing the algorithm in favor of Trump and anti-democratic platform. So, there can be biases that entered Twitter. It's like, it's an observation, not a political statement by me, but it's like, so I think that whether it's electric vehicles versus non or whatever, it's like, I think whatever there's a lot of sway that can be had.
Sometimes we always root for our team to win, whatever team that might be, but really the team we want to win is free speech. The base layer of Bitcoin, I believe, is freedom and privacy and peer-to-peer and permissionless. I'm like, those are the teams at the end of the day I really want to win. And hopefully not at the expense of a much lesser group of people I would belong to, which might be a political affiliation or one color versus another color. I just want to make sure freedom wins every time. Otherwise, we're back to the central bank. So what do we accomplish?
Totally agree.
So how did y'all end up working together? Maybe tell me a little bit about y'all's background. Each one of you, where do y'all come from? Family history, siblings, parents. Let's go back to the beginning of time here.
Go ahead, Lynne. I'll follow you up.
Oh no, Israel, you start, because you're right next to Craig on the screen. So
all right. Well, I'll kick it off then. Yeah, I'll keep it brief, and then we can get into any additional detail as needed, Craig. But okay, so I'm originally from Mexico City. I moved to the U.S. at an early age after Mexico went through a currency crisis actually in 94. So went through some of the kind of immigration experiences here in the US, which I think, and I bring it up because I do think it kind of shaped some of me as a person and my career. It had some influence as far as lessons learned from just kind of persistency, hard work, and adaptation. But grew up here in the US for the most part. Midwest was where I went to university, studied math, econ, and actuarial science. So lots of kind of math and probabilities there that ended up also kind of influencing my start with Bitcoin. So that's a little bit about my kind of personal background and studies. From there, 2014 is when I was doing a master's and started studying Bitcoin and tried co-founding a company in the Bitcoin space. We were working on doing remittances through the Bitcoin network instead of the standard banking rails. So did that for about 2 years. That was my first kind of plunge into Bitcoin, and it just immediately grasped my attention. I think both sides of Bitcoin grasped my attention. They kind of touched the soft spot of mine from the entrepreneurial technology side. Just seeing how you could actually do these remittances without all these intermediaries cross border was kind of an eye opener from the technology side for me. And then also the kind of monetary aspects of Bitcoin, having studied economics and game theory and all that, just kind of fully kind of pulled me in. So from 2014 to now, I've been pretty involved in Bitcoin in one way or another. That company didn't end up working out. I had a couple of other jobs in the venture capital, startup, fintech, traditional finance space, until recently with Lynne, we decided to launch Build with Bitcoin. About a year ago is when we started kind of really getting to work on this project. So yeah, I mean that's a kind of brief summary of what got me to where I am here.
Fantastic. And so how long have you been in Miami throughout all this journey?
Miami, I've been here for 7 years. Before that, I was in California. Before that, Brazil, Chicago, Midwest. So,
Man, traveling all over the place.
Yeah, I've moved around quite a bit.
Where are your parents or family, or is any of that still in the picture? Or?
Yeah, parents live here in Miami, brothers in California, the rest of the family's in Mexico. So Lynn and I kind of switched spots in a way. Funny enough, I mean, I was born in Mexico City, and then now I'm in South Florida, and Lynn the opposite. But yeah.
Oh, great story! I can't wait to hear how Lynn ended up trading places with you.
Well, I'll hand it off.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I have had, I guess I consider it kind of like 3 different careers or something like this, but I started after college. I was on Wall Street. So I grew up in Florida, born in Chicago, but grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, Florida Gator, and then ended up finding my way to Wall Street. Early on, I was just fascinated with Wall Street and making money, and that whole era of things, and learned a lot about economics. I'm an economics major, and so saw how the world worked in terms of money making and stocks and that whole world, and then became disillusioned, not so much with Wall Street, but the person that I was becoming by working on Wall Street. I just did not like myself as the way I was evolving. So I took a step off, and I took a year teaching diving all over the world. And then I came back to Wall Street. My heart just wasn't in it anymore. So I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. I still loved the concept of of finance and money. It was what I knew, but I moved to Mexico just to kind of think about what I wanted to do next. I was in Puerto Vallarta on the coast, and ended up just starting a marketing business there. And so ended up working for the government of Mexico, the tourism department, and for a project called Punta Mita, which is a real estate development on the western coast of Mexico, and was involved in real estate development in Mexico there for quite a while. And through that, just learned a little bit. I became involved with technology and how to market, and so was interested in app development and things like this. Technology just made my life easier living in Mexico, especially as the internet evolved and things like this. And so I ended up starting, I was noticing what was going on in technology, both inside of Mexico and then in the US. And in 2012, I started exploring starting a venture capital fund to support technology startups in Mexico. So, didn't have any venture background, but I just saw how the demographics in Mexico were amazing. They had, like half the population was under the age of 30, went directly to cell phones, bypassed the landline stage in terms of mobile development. And the cost of starting a company had really come down considerably. And I just thought there was no one, I did some investigation, no one was really exploring that. They had some more private equity types of firms in Mexico that were very successful, but they tended to think like private equity and they wanted to have control of the company, but no one was really looking at venture investing. So in 2013, I started raising funds, and 14 Meet to Ventures was the first fund launched with a few partners. And so we were a bridge between Silicon Valley and Mexico in funding early stage startups, kind of sector agnostic, but more tech focused. So one of the early things that I was introduced to along the lines of exploring it was I started a conference called the Meet to Tech Talks to kind of explore this thesis, and was introduced to Bitcoin in 2012 by Shak Khan, who was the founder of CoinDesk, the website that educated about Bitcoin in the early days. And he was a speaker at the conference. And so I immediately, normally it does take a few touch points. That was a different story for me. I kind of saw it as the missing piece to internet, and couldn't buy it in Mexico at the time. I was kind of struggling at how I could actually get some. So I made my first Bitcoin purchase in early 2013. And just, I was more focused on the venture fund I was building, but Bitcoin was always in the back of my mind. And it was something that, I explored Ethereum, I explored all the other different assets as crypto tokens evolved a little differently. It's not so much I got sucked into, that aspect of it, but I did see that there could be utility in other aspects, but I kept coming back to Bitcoin. And so, it was more kind of an interest of mine. It wasn't a core investment until 2020, when the world changed and I started kind of merging my tech background with my economics background and realizing that money was broken and Bitcoin was a really likely solution to that problem. So became much more focused on doing anything I could to be more involved in Bitcoin, and ended up winding down Meet to Ventures Fund at the end of last year. And in the interim, Israel and I connected and we talked about, he was wanting to do more in Bitcoin and I was wanting to do more in Bitcoin. And so we started looking at this as an opportunity of using our backgrounds in startups, in investing, in VC, to kind of highlight a different aspect of Bitcoin, being Bitcoin as a technology, as a fundamental change in how finance can be run in kind of this whole era of more distributed communications and distributed exchange of value. And so we just feel that it was a story that wasn't quite coming to light as much. So I think there's a lot of great macroeconomic information out there, a lot of, how Bitcoin is used, but not so much on how you actually have a startup building with Bitcoin or how you invest in companies and support companies that are building on Bitcoin, especially since so many of them do tend to be open source projects. And so it's a little disconnect between a venture investing mentality and profitability. How do you make money from investing in a company if it's open source? But we're just uncovering some really great shifts, I think tectonic shifts in the whole venture investing and startup ecosystem that, just like Bitcoin will change money, we think it'll also change the startup landscape too.
Yeah, and for those that maybe don't understand how venture backed or just how venture capital works, I had a small 2-year period where I was working with a venture firm out of it was called Orogenesis. They worked out of Silicon Valley, but they invested almost primarily in India to try to find startups and fund them to stay in India, because obviously it's a lot cheaper to fund a team in India than it is to bring them over here to California. But I'm wondering, maybe you can explain because that are some stark differences between trying to fund a Bitcoin company versus venture funds, because there's just some interesting dynamics. It seems like the Bitcoin companies are building more open source stuff. So how are y'all having to kind of change the traditional venture fund and the startups versus, and then maybe Jeff Booth is doing this too, because I think he's doing something similar to y'all, right? Is y'all doing kind of the same work, or?
We actually interviewed Jeff. I mean, we're not investors ourselves at this point. We're highlighting the investors. So we have interviewed Jeff, and he's talked about his thesis. We've also interviewed Grant from 1031. They're one of the first Bitcoin only venture capital funds. We have an episode releasing today with Early Riders, which is a fund that hasn't actually been launched, but their whole premise is they're going to raise the fund in Bitcoin, deploy Bitcoin, and distribute to their investors in Bitcoin. So we're seeing some really creative cantilever, which is a fund of funds to invest in Bitcoin focused venture funds along with individual companies. So we're seeing some really creative plays, and it all stems from people who really understand the potential of Bitcoin, but also understand that we need to also have better tools for onboarding, for storing, for custodian, especially as we get into institutional adoption. So there are some solutions that are still yet to be developed in order to have broad spread adoption. But Israel, I'm going to let you take the part about the treasury for the startups. But one of the things that I'll just say before I pass it to you is it really, even if you're an open source project, there's still competitiveness in it. We just talked to Obi, the founder of Fedi, and Fedi, Fedi comes off of the Fedi Mint protocol, which is open source. And he said he really hopes that there are many other companies that will start these, and it's kind of a collectively held custodialship of Bitcoin that allows a privacy layer on top of it for transactions. So it's great in places where you may need the privacy. If you're in a government that has restrictive surveillance techniques, so a Fedi Mint could help that, or just a simple community organization where you want to put your trust in your community versus an institution. But I won't get into the logistics of that so much, but just the point is that he says, I hope there are a lot of people that build companies like Fedi's building on top of the protocol of Fedi Mint to hold your Bitcoin, because we want competition, we want more players, but whoever has the best user experience, community outreach, and use case of it is going to be the winner or win in those aspects. So you can still be extremely profitable even with an open source protocol. And I think that's what we're going to start seeing.
Yeah, so maybe just to complement some of the points that Lynne is making, Craig, what I guess your question was also how is it changing the VC and startup landscape, right? And
yes,
I think, I mean, I think in Bitcoin startups and what's a still nascent but growing Bitcoin venture capital industry, it's injecting, I think, just sound money and value principles into traditional VC and startup space. And what I mean by that is going back to actual value creation and focus on steady growth, not necessarily exponential. I mean, it very well maybe, but focusing on actually creating value and profitability from the get-go. I mean, I think it's more of a mindset shift, which is a pretty drastic contrast from what we've seen VC, unfortunately, kind of evolve more and more into as the years go by. I mean, anyone who's worked in venture capital or has tried to raise money from venture capital in the past few years, I mean, it's pretty much focuses on growth and exit, and value is kind of, yeah, we'll touch on that, or maybe it's there, maybe it's not, but we're gonna grow, fundraise until there's an exit, and maybe you even IPO, and maybe even by the IPO stage it's still a non-profitable company, right? So it's kind of steered very far away from sound money value principles, let's say. And that's what we're definitely seeing from the drastic shift in the entrepreneurs who are building on Bitcoin, the investors who are backing the entrepreneurs building on Bitcoin. Of course, yes, there is a focus on growth. I mean, ultimately, you're there to build a scalable business, but it's much more focused from day one, what we're seeing on both ends, from the startup side and the investor side, on actual value accretion, right? How do you actually provide value? How do I get to profitability quickly? And to Lynne's point on the treasury, on the treasury management side, what we have seen is there's a very clear mindset from the get-go on understanding Bitcoin is hard and probably the best money that I have available right now. Yes, there's short-term volatility, but how am I going to incorporate into my treasury as a startup or as a business generating revenue and generating profits? How can I incorporate even just a small percentage of my revenue streams into this hard money and potentially avoid also, dilution further on? Maybe I can reduce the need to fundraise at a later stage. And so, I mean, maybe I'll stop there. There's a lot of points we hit on, but I'll just say there definitely is a big gap of mindset from the startup VC side with a Bitcoin focus and what we're kind of leaving behind, I think, in a good way.
Right. Well, I think one dynamic is Bitcoin forces you to look harder at because Bitcoin's not cheap capital. It's not capital that's losing purchasing power. It's just the opposite. And so to me, it makes your founders have a much tougher value proposition than someone just seeking cheap fiat, especially from more. I don't consider venture capital the dumb money out there, but there is a lot of dumb money out there for entrepreneurs that really is just cheap capital, and then they just let you sink or swim. Whereas at least when I was working in venture, we really did have a lot of resources for the companies that we backed because we pretty much stayed on thesis, and so we had so many connections along those lines. But the access to cheap money I think is just more abundant than it is in Bitcoin, where you actually, I think the Bitcoiners are going to be much more careful with who they give their Bitcoin to. And are you finding that now y'all, exactly what do y'all do? Y'all kind of highlight these companies in venture funds. That's kind of where y'all are at right now, correct?
Yeah, we really have. We started with a focus of two types of interviews. One are either the companies that are building on the Bitcoin protocol or related protocols like Nostr, and the other one is to highlight the investors that are supporting them. But we do have now a third category, and these are kind of like Spiral, which is doing grants, or Martell Fox, who has a PR or has a HR agency that will, help find Bitcoin talent for companies that need talent. So really anything that supports pure Bitcoin development and companies. So that's the focus of the Build with Bitcoin podcast. So not anything on other protocols, just strictly related to Bitcoin. And to your point, Craig, you're absolutely right. And we've heard this comment many times, right, Israel, about how Bitcoin is the hurdle rate. So whether you're hiring an employee or you're, giving up equity and you've got Bitcoin on your balance sheet, it's like it sets the bar. So it makes all the decisions made a little bit different. And it's just like, all of us probably once we're in Bitcoin, we think about that $5 Starbucks, when we go, it's like, do I really want to have this $5 Starbucks, or do I want to smash by $5 into Bitcoin? So, all those decisions just amplified on the startup side. But one other comment I just want to compliment what Israel. Yep. Are we good? One interview that I'll highlight is Bob Burnett. And Bob Burnett is interesting because he's both got a startup in the mining mining company with Barefoot Mining, but he's also an investor. So he's an investor in Ocean Mining and in other companies. He's got a family office that he invests in. And he's very, we talked about this whole idea of how venture is changing, because if Barefoot Mining is a successful company and he has investors in Barefoot Mining, how does he return issue returns to his investors. He's made it super clear that he has no desire to become a public company. So if he always will remain private, how would he give back returns to his investors in Barefoot Mining? And what we're seeing evolve, and Israel, I think if you want to help comment on this, but almost like companies will become like the old utility stocks of like the 70s and 80s, where they return dividends and people invested in those because you have kind of a more solid asset price, but then you receive income on top of it. And so the income would be paid in Bitcoin. And I think this is kind of a model that we're seeing. Jeff Booth also commented on this too, that probably the path for a lot of the companies Ego Death Capital is investing in won't necessarily be an IPO, but it'll be a return of the profitability that they're earning to their investors, and it'll be paid in Bitcoin. So it's a super interesting thesis.
Now, is he the largest, one of the big players, or what other players out there? He's actually the only one I've heard of just in my small circle, but I'm assuming y'all might know of more. Are there any other projects like his born out there yet? Maybe can you mention some of them?
Yeah, 1031 was probably the very first one. That's Marty Bent and Matt O'Dell are attached to that, but Grant Gillian and his brother are the managing partners of it. They're out of Austin and Nashville, and they've been really early in investing purely on Bitcoin. Also, Stillmark Capital, Elise Killen out of San Francisco. So she came from a traditional venture background and then started one of the first Bitcoin only featured funds. Ego Death from Jeff. They're one of the newer funds, but they've certainly raised a lot for no, I mean, definitely because of Jeff's profile and his way of thinking and the way he articulates his Bitcoin thesis. Fulgur Ventures, HiveMind Ventures out of San Francisco, which has a really interesting kind of interplay of AI plus Bitcoin. And then there's Alan Farrington's fund. I'm drawing a blank on the name of his fund in London. So there are, it's not a large universe. And what Israel and I hope to do is to document it and to have as Build with Bitcoin grows, we want to create like a open source database of the investors that are supporting companies with a Bitcoin thesis. And then also some of the Bitcoin companies too, so that people can kind of go and see what projects are out there.
And so y'all are actually looking for funds like Jeff's to highlight with the work they're doing, bring them onto your podcast, get them to tell their story, give you regular updates. And so what's y'all's kind of end game with this, to build somewhat of a media company around that, or to kind of help connect people or be kind of part of the connective tissue between that ecosystem?
Well, I mean, so would certainly be part of the connective tissue. That's what we're starting out doing, because we noticed that it was missing. I mean, kind of going back to why we launched Build with Bitcoin, which Lynne touched on earlier. We saw that there was a lot of content and podcast media out there focusing on Bitcoin, the asset, from the economics or monetary side, why it's important. But there was this gap that we noticed on the technology side, venture capital, and Bitcoin startups. That all wasn't too well covered. Lynne and I's background naturally kind of had a good fit there. So we're starting off, yes, being the connecting tissue. What we do from this is we're still kind of working through what the end game is for us. I mean, I think there's a few doors that could open. For us.
Yeah. Israel and I took we talked about this at the beginning, and we took the proof of work approach to it. So it's like we thought, well, we'll put it out there and we'll see. Our audience, obviously, I think people in Bitcoin are interested in what we what we highlight, but also people in traditional venture capital, people in institutions that may not be thinking about Bitcoin. They might think of it like a stock or like a product or whatever, but when they start hearing about it as a functional technology, and startups too, so, there is an opportunity for me to build on this technology instead of traditional tech. So we're still finding our audience. We definitely want to monetize it in some way, whether that's having a fund or SPVs or associating with a fund, or we don't know, but or just being the content or the connective tissue, as you said. But
Right.
but we just thought the best thing we can do is just to start it and see where it goes from there. And we're really, I don't want to speak with Israel, but I wake up every morning and I just get so excited with all the possibilities there are.
Yep. Same here. I had a similar approach. I was looking to just connect with fellow Bitcoiners, learn more about them, and maybe just help connect the community. When I got on Spaces, I didn't feel like there was a whole lot of non-toxic spaces to attend. So I said, maybe if we could just have a show that kind of keeps a civil discourse where ideas can come to mesh and learn. But then it, grew into all the shows we have today and now into what I'm doing now. So, but I would love to continue to highlight whatever work y'all are doing, because I'm doing something similar, but of course I'm not highlighting any venture companies or any startups, which I'd love to do. So if y'all ever want to, collaborate and do something like we're doing now with a little startup that y'all have, I'd love to highlight them and get the word out for them, because I think this connective tissue, I think right now we are in this, Bitcoin can only move as fast as the education of the rest of the planet can happen, because it really is a big educational workload that we're looking at. And I don't think there's enough content creators out there. I think we need more, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's plenty of room for cooperation, and part of what's so great about the network effect in Bitcoin, which has been touched on in many other episodes and by many other people, but it's you're every node, to put it that way. Every participant in the Bitcoin network is kind of is benefiting from the creative value that's generated from all other honest nodes in the network, right? I mean, sounds a little abstract, but all that to say that there's room for cooperation, and there's a value add by every new honest player, to put it that way, that goes into the space, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's tons of blue ocean out here for any other entrepreneurs looking to create content or start a company. There is so much blue ocean, we're hardly a blip on the radar as far as what could be what is going to happen. I don't know about y'all, but I think all asset classes head to Bitcoin. It's kind of like the event horizon of a black hole, and it's just barely started. So what do y'all need as far as what companies do you look for, so I can keep my eye out for y'all and tell the rest of the team what's a good fit for y'all to highlight?
Well, the core tenant is it has to be, really focused on Bitcoin and pure Bitcoin. So, I mean, I don't know, Israel, you might be dealing with the same, but Israel and I are both registered as media for the Bitcoin conference this week. And you've been traveling, Israel, so I don't know if you've yet logged into the app, but I registered myself and I've gotten a dozen requests to interview people that are definitely not Bitcoin, but they've got the word Bitcoin all throughout their kind of pitch from their PR agency, and you look at it, it's like, oh, this is definitely not Bitcoin related. It's like layer 2 with the DAO, and it's like just the whole alphabet soup of, what you think, and a person that's less familiar with the tech stack of it might think it's related to Bitcoin, but it's clearly not. So, yeah, we have a pretty close filter. It's got to be Bitcoin supportive, related, help people with adoption, education, the financial transactions, and then the investors that really support this whole thesis. And we don't think that there'll be many. I mean, there might be some traditional VCs or investors that will start to appreciate Bitcoin's potential and look at companies in the space, but we think we really want to keep our core values close to the Bitcoin ethos and support those who are really, really of the mindset and not just the upside potential in terms of the investor community.
Yeah, I remember when I was in venture capital, they would always interweave the latest buzzwords into their thesis or into their pitch deck, and I'm like, we know that you're not. How many people on staff do you have with whatever that buzzword is? It's like, oh, that was just slid into the air for the dumb money to just say, I want to invest and find somebody that's working in X. And so it would just be a one slide on their pitch deck, but they had zero talent in that. So I see a lot of crypto projects throwing the word Bitcoin in there to hope to get, past the radar. But like you said, anybody that kind of knows it can kind of sniff that out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But it's not easy. I mean, I've had to dive deep to make sure that I wasn't passing on something that could be. But one thing that Israel and I found is, where we know that the universe of investors that are truly focused on Bitcoin companies or Bitcoin related companies is small. We've been so excited to see how many startups in different realms between, mining, tools for financial education, adoption, helping corporations with payments, custody. There's a lot, and it varies by region too. We've been pretty successful in connecting with people in the LATAM region just because of both of our backgrounds, but we'd love to get more. And we've just done a series of interviews with some of the startups in Europe, but we haven't really reached out in Africa. We know there are a lot of great projects on the African continent that because of the tremendous needs they have for solving different currencies, just payments, transactions. So we'd love to explore some of those technologies too.
Yeah, I know from the early days of us starting the Bitcoin Daily, we had this first expansion into the current 8 shows, but right after the first, I think, 100th episode, or maybe the 200th episode, we were like, we should expand into Tokyo and Australia and Africa. We haven't gotten around to it yet, but there was so much activity going on over there. We have actually a lot of Africans that are daily listeners to the shows, and they have a total different use case for Bitcoin than we do in the West, because we have banking options. They are, for the most part, unbanked, have terrible currencies, have a lot of friction in just finance in general. Whereas over here, it's more of a luxury than it is a necessity over there. They really have a hard time getting hold of capital for any transaction.
Well, and I think generally in the global South, and Israel talked about how he came to Bitcoin so early because of his experiences and remittance and just familiarity with the problems. And I think that also is why I came to it. Not just, I mean, I said that I was attracted to it as a technology, but it was because I had been living in Mexico by that time, for about 10 years. And I had the experience of trying to send an employee funds on an emergency basis through Western Union, and they took 50% of it. I had to stand in line, for 2 hours to pay my electric bill because it's like there was no online. I mean, it's like that was the only way you could pay it and not have it cut off. And I had the currency devalued shortly after I arrived in Mexico. And I'm like, they can't do that. It's like, oh yeah, they actually can. And they did. So, having personally lived through experiences that after coming off of Wall Street were not first nature to me. When I saw Bitcoin, I really think I understood it at a different level than I would have if I just stayed in New York. So
Yeah. So how is Mexico City today, as far as that, describing it that way? Is it coming along, or what's the scene look like as far as Bitcoin or just technology in general?
Israel, you tell me your thoughts, but I think it's surpassed, just because, again, talking about the demographics, the fact that 50% of the country or the population's under the age of 30, it's all digital, it's all mobile. I think the advances that they have, even in terms of documentation and verification, of credentials, but it's super easy. And they have systems where the SAPI system, Israel, which is where I can send money to anybody through Mexican bank accounts, and it takes seconds for it to arrive with no fee, as opposed to wire transfers in the States, which still frost me when I think of having to pay $10 to $25 to transfer a payment bank to bank that is just a ledger entry, and it may not settle for a few days. So I think there's a large amount of the population that's unbanked or certainly underbanked, lack of credit access, lack of banking relationships. So that hinders some aspects of growth. On the other hand, I think Mexico's economy is much stronger because they're not as debt centric. So individual consumer debt, mortgage debt is much lower. Debt to GDP in Mexico is 52% versus the 134% in the US right now. So, interesting.
Yep, that's a big statement right there.
Yeah.
We forget about that. A lot of our wealth goes to service a debt from our, I'd like to call them ancestors, but unfortunately, the guys are slightly older than us.
Yeah. And in Mexico and in Latin America, just one more point on that. I mean, Lynn and I have talked about this from the beginning. I mean, that it'll be great to just kind of follow the startup scene there as well, because it's just bound to grow massively for something like Bitcoin, right? Both as the asset and the technology. You look at traditional venture in Latin America, and it's I think by a wide margin the number one industry that's invested in within VC is fintech, right? So, and it's
100%.
it's for some of the reasons that Lynn is mentioning, right? You have a large part of the population that's unbanked, depending on the country. Maybe I'm gonna keep it vague, but maybe anywhere from 30 to 50% ish, that range of the population is unbanked and has no access to traditional services, which we, in developed Western countries kind of take for granted. So you're looking at, depending on the country, I mean, from this conversation here, 1 to 2 of us, depending on the country, don't have access to basic financial services, right? So the fact that you now have this technology, which is of course permissionless, borderless, and provides the ability to kind of plug into so many things that have been absent before. It's just, I mean, it's going to be great to follow the Bitcoin scene specifically, and then how it differs. To your point, Craig, I mean, money is something a little different to all of us, right? I mean, it has different meaning, or falls in a different level of our priority list for each of us, depending on our need or circumstances. So the different use cases will be, I mean, I think it'll surprise all of us with just the amount of applications that are still to be, kind of discovered for something like Bitcoin. So yeah, Latin America is a particularly interesting region for the Bitcoin scene, definitely.
Yeah, I think we're going to be looking back at places that adopt Bitcoin similar to how we look at Dubai and Singapore, that were just, seemingly at the nation state level, overnight successes. That a lot of these overnight successes we're going to see happen for countries that adopted Bitcoin earlier. And we're going to be looking back, well, they became so successful because, like in Singapore, they just had this free port that was massive where the whole world could just trade there. Same thing with Bitcoin nations like El Salvador and Argentina and a lot of others that are just getting in early on this and setting up their populations for success in this new financial world. I don't know if y'all see that as well.
Yeah, I do think there's also a real attraction to crypto in the broader sense. I think that there's this feeling that Bitcoin's gotten too high price. I mean, we hear it everywhere, but it's like, oh, so let me look at the next new thing to get invested in. But I think that from the government level, I think El Salvador has just been such a beautiful example of being able to reclaim some financial independence of a country that has been really tied to Western financial regulations and debt, and free themselves a little bit of this. Argentina is such a curious experiment. I'm really watching that closely to see how they combat massive inflation rates. I mean, what Milei has done in just a short period of time and bringing down Argentina's inflation rate and growth of inflation rate has been remarkable. So it shows it can be done. The one thing that I do see, I think the opportunities are massive in LATAM and also in the global South overall. But the funds, like you say, opportunity is what is that saying? It's ideas are all over the place, but opportunity to invest in them is not equal. And we still see so much of the investable capital, or the capital willing to invest, coming from the US or from Europe. So we still do not see a lot of native venture capital or investors coming out of LATAM or the global South. They're very limited.
Yeah, we always thought that came from the culture, the risk averse culture of the world compared to America has, seems like there was a distillation of risky people that would move here and just go for it, and they left their country to come to America. And so it was kind of we have an outsized share of those risk tolerant minds in America. And but if you look at the American background, they're from everywhere. It's like a big melting pot of all the people that will take risks, just move here. Now I don't know how much that plays anymore, but that's when I was in venture capital. You just saw people willing to just bet on a venture, on a team, on the jockey, the horse, whatever you want to call it. Whereas in other countries, they were just so risk averse. They were very cautious. They would invest in the old brick and mortars, the main streets, the real estate plays, the big old companies. You'd never get them. You could never talk them into taking that risky venture like we do here. It just seems like part of the culture. Like everybody wants to bet on the guy going for it. I don't know if it's just, I don't know where that comes from, but I don't know how you export that into other countries.
Well, I mean, I'm an export, so it's like when I started venture investing down here, and I would talk to my counterparts. It's like, well, they don't have cash flow. I'd be showing a company for co-investment, and it's like, because they're so early stage. It's like what you're doing is not venture if you need cash flow and and profitability before you invest in them. So you're absolutely right, Craig. I mean, I see that too. I mean, things have changed, I think. As venture has the whole ecosystem has grown up in Mexico and LATAM. It's there's some fantastic VC funds now, but in the early days, it was like I said, it was really more private equity investing than venture.
Yeah, and you're not going to get the 100 or 1,000x out of the private equity play. You can't have both. You got to pick one. Yeah. So maybe tell me about, shifting gears a little, tell me about y'all's podcasting journey. Is this the first time for y'all to create content like that? What have y'all learned? How's that working out for y'all?
Yeah, maybe. Okay, I'll start. Yeah, definitely the first time, Craig. I mean, I don't know about you, Lynn, but sometimes it does kind of, it's a bit surprising, I guess, that I didn't necessarily imagine myself doing a podcast. If you asked me a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, I probably would have said like it's nowhere on the radar. But the experience has been great so far. I mean, it's quite an interesting. You certainly appreciate a lot of the work that goes into the content creation life cycle. I'll start with that. You're well aware of that, Craig. I know. Oh, yeah. I know you're busy on that end as well. So, I mean, you definitely appreciate all the work that goes behind it. But it's honestly, it's a great and kind of beautiful experience to get into the education side of it. And in a selfish way, you also learn a ton. I mean, getting the opportunity to speak one-on-one with some of the people we've interviewed so far is I mean, a pretty special and unique lens into what's going on in the entrepreneurial Bitcoin space for our focus, right? But great experience. I'll hand it over to you, Lynn.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think early on, when I started my career on Wall Street, I was young and a woman, which were two strikes against me. And I, got on a TV show and started writing and a radio show. And I just realized the power of communication to just elevate, your credibility basically as a thought leader in the space. And so I've throughout everything, even the venture fund that I raised, we started this conference that we had that, brought together Silicon Valley and the Mexico entrepreneurial space. And I think that was just a great showcase for everybody. And so by having these spaces, and I think it evolves over time. So it started out as TV and radio, and now we're into podcasting, but I've just been very attuned to how you connect with people. I think it's, to Israel's point, it's just been fantastic to just kind of build and evolve the network. It's an interest that we both share. And it's my first time podcasting and thinking about it too. And I just want to give a shout out to Natalie Brunel, who shared with me some great tips about some of the tools she uses, because I think it makes it so much easier. I think I had explored a podcast with Meet to Ventures a couple of years ago, and the world was a lot different and more complicated years ago than it is today in terms of being able to really streamline the entire process of of recording and editing. So that's helpful. And I think the tools are getting better, but.
And one added, I guess, bonus, or something else that comes to mind, to put it that way, which was a bit unexpected for me, although it's pretty obvious, is you kind of polish up your communication skills, right? So you start to learn the importance of clear communication, some of these soft skills that actually, interestingly enough, I think some pretty prominent people have spoken to this previously, about how we're maybe moving from an era of hard skills being very in demand, and specifically within technology I'm speaking to, right? So maybe computer science, software developers, all these kind of tech hard skills being in high demand in the coming years, to now maybe we have these, with the entrance of AI and all these other tools, you kind of have a new era coming, where it's actually going to be probably some of the soft skills and communication skills, the interpersonal skills that will be, maybe proportionally even more important, than they previously have been. So to me, all that to say that it's been an interesting experience to just have a very clear focus, and also both as a host or as being interviewed, needing to be a clear communicator. I mean, I think that's something that, podcasting and media has given me, which, it's, I mean, I think it's useful for anyone, right? So anyways, that's just another added bonus to your question, Craig.
Yeah, 100% agree. The soft skills that come along with doing, and I say nothing gets better than just doing the reps. If you've done 100 podcasts versus trying to do the perfect podcast, edited and sound engineers and lit correctly, I'll take the 100 podcasts any day, because many times you just need to press record. You just need to invite people. You need to go live. And that's where your skill set comes from. It's that old Michael Jordan quote where he's missed more shots than everybody's taken. And there's something about interviewing people and networking and working on your communication abilities that is priceless, especially in a world where that really can't be taken from you. Whereas I think a lot of, like you said, the hard skills are now we're seeing. I mean, how long ago was it, Israel, where parents were being told, teach your kid how to code, that'll always be needed. And now it's like the coders positions are just getting gobbled by AI. And that seemed to be just a few years ago, because we homeschooled. And so we were always looking for future-proof skill sets that we could teach our children. And a lot of the ones that we were thinking around are gone now. All the engineering jobs, a lot of the hard skill jobs, but being able to create a brand, being able to communicate effectively, being able to community build, I think those are kind of the jobs of the future, because I'm seeing the need to build communities and to build brands out there. And I think that's kind of the space y'all are participating in right now, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and Craig, you're so correct about the community building, and I do want to just give a shout out to the Bitcoin community, because, as like even just throwing back to my early Wall Street days, it was tough. I mean, people were not that helpful for one another. It was very competitive and cutthroat. But Bitcoin, I mean, Israel, right? It's like we'll ask somebody for an interview for, if you have any recommendations, and they'll immediately send out 5 emails to other founders or other people. And everyone always asks us, who else can I help introduce you to? And so we've had, I think, some fantastic guests. I mean, we've just been really thrilled with the quality of conversations that we've had on the podcast for such an early young podcast. And it's because each guest will refer to us or introduce us to another great guest. And so that's been very helpful. But that's the beauty of the Bitcoin community. I think everyone is so willing to support and lift each other up. And we feel that we are in this common mission to make the world a better place and to give it through better money and better, I mean, to Israel's point about companies, instead of building growth at all costs, but to have something of value that actually provides, a real revenue stream, it just reverts back to a sounder time. So yeah, community is great.
Yeah, it really is the best group of people I've ever worked with. And I've community built before, either through my athletic organizations, I've fundraised for churches. the Bitcoin community has got to be not just very helpful. I mean, they are super helpful, but they're very well-rounded, well-educated people. And I'm shocked at the level of humility they have. I think it's just because we've all been humbled by Bitcoin multiple times. Anytime we think we understand it, it just kind of corrects us.
And so diverse, to have such a commonality among so diverse of a group of people, that it's great. It's really taught me open-mindedness too, so.
Isn't it crazy how well you hit it off with Bitcoiners? It's like you connect so quickly, because for you to be standing in front of another Bitcoiner, so many other boxes have been checked off that they had to have known this, and this to come to Bitcoin. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gotten this far down the road. So I find we have a lot in common. I connect with people literally on the other side of the planet nearly instantly. We almost have the same mind, because it's a long road to get to Bitcoin. You had to go through a lot to get here. So where do y'all put y'all's content, and how can we learn more, and how can we help, or how can I help? How can the Bitcoin Daily help y'all?
Yeah, I mean, we have them on most of the platforms, the main ones at least, Craig. So we have the YouTube channel, we have Spotify, Apple. What others am I missing there, Lynn? We have the Buzzsprout. Yeah.
Google. I mean, Buzzsprout is our platform that kind of pushes it out to everybody, but I think most people listen to it on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. So we're refreshing our website already this week, where we'll have like highlights of all the episodes on that. We've been a little behind on that project, so we had a kind of a teaser website, but that'll also list all of them and have a subscription link too for learning more about episodes that are coming up. One of the things that Israel and I have done, it kind of by accident at first, but it's turned out to be popular, is after every 5 episodes, we do a highlight episode, and we kind of tease. It's like 20 to 30 minutes, and we just say what some of the key points were in the 5 previous conversations. And so not everyone has, we really wanted to keep the podcast a little shorter, like 40 minutes, but we can't seem to. So they're an hour basically. But if you don't have an hour, or you don't want to devote an hour to a conversation, at least the highlights tells you who might be interesting to you. So, or what are some of the key takeaways or commonalities between the conversations. So the highlight episodes have been very well received.
Mm-hmm.
And
how many interviews are y'all up to nowadays?
15.
Fantastic. That's good. And how long have y'all been going at it?
We launched on Halving Day.
No way. Oh, y'all are doing fantastic. Keep going. Y'all ever do live video like this, or is that something y'all just kind of step in now and then? Have y'all thought about it?
We did one live episode. We had one of our guests who was in Mexico City, Jose Lemus from Ibex. And so he really preferred to do it live. So, I mean, Israel and I did our initial podcast. He was in Mexico City. So we have a studio that we have access to. So we've done 2 live ones, and we're happy to do them whenever occasion arises.
Well, that's all we do at the Bitcoin Daily is live content. So anytime y'all want to come do live, we're either on X Spaces, step up to the stage, or just reach out to me. I'll be happy to do live video chats with y'all on updates, especially if y'all find anything interesting. It's super easy. And, I do think the world's kind of craving the live content a little bit more, because there's so much edited content out there, especially with AI. It just seems to get drowned out and all the noise. It's kind of why I prefer it. Plus, there's no editing. It is what it is.
Yeah, and their conversations, they tend to be, open to whatever's going on in the world at the moment. We'd love to, and I mean, just again, I'm usually behind the build with Bitcoin. I think you like to. I haven't been participating as much in some of the spaces because, I think people like to have the person, and I've always been behind my, personal Twitter or X account, which is Lynne Ray. So until I get that back, I'm under the build with Bitcoin handle, but we'd love to participate more, and especially your content section, or I love your Philosophy Sunday one too. It's just like one of my favorite ones.
Me too.
Yeah.
Too. And that's always been mine. That's why that of all the shows, I was like, all right, we had to at some point had to each claim a day. And I was at the time hosting maybe 3 or 4 of the shows. And I said, I want Philosophy Sunday, however this shakes out. And then I just started recruiting actual philosophers that know nothing about Bitcoin. And so I'm hoping to orange pill my philosophy groups and communities because I don't know, I just like hanging out with them. They're way smarter than me, so I learn a lot from them.
Yeah.
But those are always fun shows and kind of different. I think it shows how much Bitcoin touches so many other parts of our lives. That's important. But anyway, thank y'all for coming today. Maybe let's touch base in a month if y'all have anyone y'all'd like to bring on or highlight, or just give us an update on what y'all are doing. I'd love to do
Great.
this again.
Well, and also when you're in Nashville, Craig, you're going to be running into so many of your listeners and followers and things like this. If you run into companies that we should be talking to, please have them get in touch with us. Our DMs are open. So we love to know about new companies that we should be highlighting as long as you're Bitcoin focused.
Yes.
Really Bitcoin focused.
And thanks for having us as well, Craig. Appreciate reaching out on Twitter and having us on.
Yeah, no problem. And I'll come find y'all at the in the media booth. I'm supposed to be helping out Nate Martin. I don't know if y'all know who that is, but 99 Bitcoin.
Yep.
Y'all ever heard of him? Yeah. So
Yep.
me and him have gotten close, and I've got a lot of guys that I've gotten close to that I'm supposed to just go say hello. But if I don't see y'all, try to come find me at the meetup table. I'll be over there with all the meetup organizers because, of course, I organize 3 Bitcoin meetups here locally in Louisiana. So that's kind of one of my too.
Well, thank you so much for all that you do. I mean, I've been a listener since I think the first week you started, and just
No way.
I admire your resilience, your tenacity, your staying with it, to your point, and I think you've just added a great layer to education and awareness and the consistency that you do it and the team that you've assembled and put together. You've got some great people, working with you on that. So I'm looking forward to the conference that I hope you're still going to do in New Orleans, because it's one of my favorite cities and I haven't been there for way too long. So I will definitely be looking at joining you there. Yes,
I definitely am going to do something in New Orleans. As far as the Bitcoin Daily, man, it is a team effort. I could not do it without these guys. It's I know I get a lot of the thanks and gratitude for it, but they do the majority of the work now. I'm just like one of the fellas, doing the Sunday show. But I can't tell you how great it is to work with these. There's about 25 of us that help put on the Bitcoin Daily show now. It's crazy.
Oh wow!
So it's
congrats, Craig.
Well, thank y'all. Thank y'all so much. Well, I will see y'all in a few days, hopefully. Safe travels. Hopefully the plane makes it safe and on time. And I'll see y'all but another 48 hours, hopefully.
Yep. Looking forward to it.
Appreciate it, Craig.
Guys. Have an awesome day.
You too.
All right. That was some great guests that we've had on the show. Israel and Lynne, they are doing some really good work trying to put together venture capital and anything venture based, whether it's, a small Bitcoin only startup, building second layers, building Lightning, building any of the UI user interface or stuff. I mean, they're looking for all the great companies and startups and the investors and venture backed funds that can do that. So I used to actually do that kind of stuff. My job was to build relationships with founders between the founder of these companies and the VC firm. And so I kind of have a passion for the work that they're doing and wanted to highlight it. And I appreciate them being early listeners of the show. Of course, they will be in Nashville. So if you're in Nashville, come find them. If you ever have a good Bitcoin company that you want to start up or you have any ideas for, Lynne and Israel may be people to reach out to. They can help get you in touch with people looking to back Bitcoin companies. Again, this is Craig LeBlanc with the Bitcoin Daily Show. I'm one of 12 hosts that host 8 shows, 8 to 10 a.m. every day, Monday through Sunday. Have not missed a single day since we started, 280 days straight. Many of us will be at the Nashville convention. If you see any of us running around, please grab us, introduce yourself to us. I'd love to meet y'all in person. But if not, if you can't make it, tune in every day, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on X and request to speak and just say hello, introduce yourself. If you got a question, great. If not, we would just love to hear your voice on the Bitcoin Daily Show. Again, such a team effort. I just wanted to thank my team of hosts and co-hosts and people working in the background. It's really become like a Bitcoin Daily family. If you are interested in joining or helping out the Bitcoin Daily Show, please reach out to me or any of the hosts that you see on stage. There's always room to work and network and help do stuff in the background, whether you're or not you're somebody that likes to speak on stage. That's only a few of us that have that job. Of course, we would love to have you be a voice on the Bitcoin Daily Show. But if you just want to help send emails or edit or do things like that, there's so much work to be done to build what we call the social layer or the educational layer on Bitcoin. There's a lot of work to be done. And that really is, I think, what is stopping the Bitcoin community from growing is just we need more organizations and groups of people that are committed to producing really good content, getting it out there, building communities, creating educational content, creating entertaining, fun shows. That's what we attempt to do at the Bitcoin Daily, to produce educational, entertaining, fun, community-driven Bitcoin content shows on X, and here with the live video is what we're kind of moving into as well as just another arm of it. And so anything y'all can do to like, share, repost, comment, we really appreciate all that. And please thank any of the hosts that you see or any speakers come up. They do a lot of hard work, and I'm really grateful to be working with them. So thank you guys so much for another great episode. And I will see y'all tomorrow morning. I will be driving to Nashville during tomorrow's show, and I'll be arriving there sometime tomorrow evening. And I hope to see y'all in person. If not, please tune in to the Bitcoin Daily Show, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern here on X. Thanks a lot, guys.